So for this video, I'm going to try to disassemble and reassemble a rear hub for you. On this bike, one of the ways you can tell if a hub needs to be replaced is, number one, it's not spinning very well. You can see it stops pretty prematurely. But also, if you look at this hub, it's kind of bouncing about as if the bearings are kind of catching on the inside walls there. So that's one of the indicators. It's time to re-grease these bearings. So I'm going to go ahead and take that apart for you. Make sure you hold on to all these. Okay, so got your 15 millimeter and a 17 millimeter deep socket here. Just stick it on there, like so. There we go. Actually, before I forget and get too ahead of myself, there's one thing you want to do. Go to this side, and just note how far away this nut is away from this end. So it looks like 1 1/8 inch. So I'll just write that down real quick. And that's going to let us know that we put it back together the right way. Also, it's nice to have a wheel that's already done and assembled, so something like this, just in case you forget what goes where, you'll have an example to go off of. Okay, there's that. So that's all your pieces. You got this cone here, it holds, it goes against right there, against the smaller bearing. Get your sprocket. You had a bearing that was sitting in here like that. You got this spring piece, and then another bearing right in there. And then what I usually do, we also have these brake shoes. Okay. You got your washer, lever arm, and this guy. We'll just turn that off. There we go. Wow. All these pieces that are just kind of dirty, but not really covered in grease. I'm just going to set them aside. So these nuts, washer, set it aside over here with the rest of the nuts and washers. Alright, all these pieces we're going to drop into this big jar of degreaser that I have here. And we're just going to let this stuff set overnight. We could also manually go through with like some spray degreaser, but it's much easier. Just drop it in there. And you should definitely be wearing gloves and working with this stuff, but I am out of gloves. Alright, so that's that. Now what happens next is next morning I'll go to take this out. I'll bring it all to the sink, and I'll just wash them off in a big basket like this. And then of course we would clean out this hub. Something like that. There you go. Pretty good. So I'm going to set this wheel aside. I'm going to grab this wheel. This wheel I've already cleaned out. I've got some bearing parts all over the place, so we're going to try to put one back together real quick. So here's what we start with. I'm going to grab this guy. It's got something good. Grab this guy. Yeah, it looks cleaner. Put it on there. Let's double check that. Yep, just like that. So you see how that goes? How it's pitched outward. So we'll line up the teeth on this thing. Maybe. There we go. Grab our washer here. Put that down. And we're going to grab one of these larger nuts. Spin that down. And this is where 1 1/8 comes in handy. Oops. There we go. Okay, so we're at 1 inch. You go down a little bit more. Perfect. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to hold this one in place. I'm going to spin this back some, because what I want is to get some of this thread lock on there. Once I tighten this down, I don't want it going anywhere. I'm going to spin that down right there. And now I'm going to hold this one. And I'm just going to spin this loose now. we go. Let me just double check this. Yep, we're still good. So, on tight. And now what I'm going to do, tighten her up just like this. Just going to push this lever arm down. Okay, there we go. So with the thread lock on there and these two nuts jammed together, that shouldn't go anywhere. So now we get to, from here on, the name of the game is to just cover everything in grease, essentially. Okay, I'm gonna grab this bearing. We're just gonna fill all the crevices in there with grease. There we go. Slide that down, just like that. The flat bit against the flat bit. Just continue covering things with grease. Now I want the spring. I'm just going to try to force grease down through that hole, through the top here, so maybe you'll be able to see this. Just kind of pushing it in with my finger here. Maybe you can see that, maybe not. But a force grease through the top here. Now, we got, wipe it away a bit. We have two prongs right here. What we're going to do with these two prongs is we're going to stick them in these two slots that hopefully you can see. There we go. So now that's fixed like that. And we're just going to smear a little bit of grease on the outside here. Grab a couple of these brake shoes. Alright. Now you see these shoes have little steps at the bottom there. These steps are going to coincide with some notches right there. Hopefully you can see that. Let me smear away some grease. You see there's a bit of a notch right here that's just big enough to fit this brake shoe. So if you fit it in there, it would be just like that. What I'm going to do, take a little bit of grease and smear it on the inside here. There we go. And then grease is just going to hold that shoe in place while I continue to flip this about. There we go. So that's what that part should look like. And now, so notice there's two sides of this wheel. There's a narrow end and a larger end. So we're going to fit this bit through the larger end, and that'll be the only end it can fit in. So we're just going to take some grease, smear it on the inside here. There we go. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab it like that and set her down. That way she doesn't fall out. So I'm going to grease this crevice right in here. Grab another bearing. Again, we're filling all these empty spaces with grease. For this, we're going to put the ball bearing side down so the flat bit is up, like that. Next thing we want is one of these guys. Grease it just like that. Actually, I'll go ahead and grease this end first. Okay. And we're going to take this guy. Putting it bearing side down. We're going to grab one of these cones. Let's see here. Alright, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go ahead and just finger tighten this all the way down, which feels about right there. Yeah. And you can see some grease just kind of squish through the cracks there. That's fine. We can, no, maybe not. It looks kind of dirty. So, yeah, that's tight. So, I'm going to fix this lever on the other side down and make sure everything's right. And what I'm going to do, okay, I'm going to line this up one of these spokes here. Hopefully you can see that. So I'm going to go onto the other side, reach this, and I'm going to turn this wrench from right here to right here. So just the next grouping of spokes, which is approximately 1/8 of a turn. But there we go. Yep, that's right there. So I'm going to hold this there. I take this skinny nut here, spin her all the way down. I'm just kind of watching to make sure that lever arm doesn't move while I'm doing this. There we go. Alright, well that's it. We can check it. That's spinning freely. Oh, you can see it's not jumbling the way it was. Well, I guess it was technically the other bearing, but you see what I'm saying. It spins smooth. And that's all it is. And we can double check with our ruler here. Yep. Right there. Right there. The same on both sides. So we did that right. Well, one more thing. I'll go ahead and lay out some parts for you, just in case you want to go back and reference. So we have our. Actually, I have this. See if I can spin this free. Okay. So you got your lever arm. And against right here, I'm going to take this bearing. And then comes next is this guy. That's going to fit inside the prongs right there. Going to get 2 brake shoes. That goes on, those fit on either of these notches just like that. So goes right there, bearing. Comes next to this guy spins into here. And that also gets one of these bearings that sits flat like that. And then we get one of these smaller bearings that sits inside there. And finally, we get a cone. Which is this guy, and that spins down and fits against that bearing like that. Like that. Prongs. Sits flat like that. That goes together like that. Okay. So there you go. Alright, so here's a subtle thing I wanted to point out real quick. We have these 2 different sprockets, I guess, that would go on the rear bearings. So you see that goes right there. But there's 2 different styles here, and we actually have more than 2 different styles, but I just wanted to point out something. These correspond to different diameter cones. And what I mean by that is this, you have a smaller one and a larger one here. This larger one does not fit onto this smaller gear here. However, it fits perfectly right there. Now, same for on the flip side. This is way too small for that. However, that's pretty good right there. So, just something to bear in mind when you're working through all these rear bearings